Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Magda Tedder. I'm the Schwidler Chair in Judaic Studies, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our Passover webinar with Hollis Granoff Landauer, who is a friend of our center and who generously shares her deep knowledge about 20th century Haggadot. In the past, we've heard from Hollis about kibbutz Haggadot. Last year, it was about the Holocaust-era Haggadot, and 2 years ago about Haggadot from the British Mandate, late British Mandate era. Today, we're looking forward to shifting to the English language Haggadot and learning about those that were created in support of different causes. I want to say that listeners who are in our New York City area and Fordham at Fordham can see some of the Haggadot in our Judaica collections. In fact, if you joined us and you saw the welcoming slide, some of them they come from our collection. So let me introduce Hollis. Hollis Granoff Landauer holds degrees from Mount Holyoke, from UCLA and Simmons College. After working in libraries for a number of years, Hollis opened a design bookstore called Another Man's Poison in Toronto, which focused on books on design, graphics, and architecture. For over 25 years or more, Hollis has been collecting and studying kibbutz and kibbutz-related Haggadot, but as we'll see today, also others as well. Finally, before I hand over the screen to Hollis, I want to invite those of you who are at Fordham or the New York City area for our in-person retrospective of the work of film director Nurit Aviv called Filming Words, next week from Tuesday, April 22nd to Friday, April 25th. And I will send a link to that retrospective in the chat form. I would also invite those of you who are, again, physically in New York to visit Walsh Library, our library's building, and the O'Hare Special Collections to see an exhibit, The COVID Pandemic 5 Years On, which explores our own experiences of the COVID pandemic through Fordham's collection, both of artifacts collected from the pandemic, but also offering a wider historical lens and exploring themes of responses, remembering and forgetting since the Middle Ages until now. And yes, there are a lot of items related to the historical Jewish experience. And we also have some Haggadot on view as well in this exhibit. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Hollis. And Hollis, the screen is yours. And you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Magda, for the very nice introduction, and special thanks to Fordham for not allowing the attacks on Jewish students that have occurred on many other campuses since October 7th, 2023. I'm very happy to be here again. This Passover, Jews around the world celebrate for a second year under the dark shadow of the horrific massacre and hostage-taking of October 7th, while the Landauer family has been blessed with a Pesach baby, Clea Maria Hastings Landauer. Once again, I want to thank my family, Michael, my husband, Zichrono Livracha, and my children and their partners, Melissa, Matt, and Emma, Rachel, and John, for their support, and my father, Dr. Morris Granoff, for giving me a love of Judaism, the Jewish people, and the state of Israel. Also, a thanks to Rachel for running my slides. On Passover, Jews celebrate the Egyptian Exodus, the foundation story of the Jewish people, with a Haggadah, literally a telling. The traditional Haggadah is an identity rite based on 15 ritual actions. Its core is the exegetical midrash on Deuteronomy 26:5-8, in which the Exodus story is re-experienced rather than retold. The story consists of two liberations, from slavery to freedom and from polytheism to Judaism. The second part of the Seder celebrates a future messianic redemption at the end of days. God is the sole agent of the Exodus. Moses is mentioned only once in passing. The 5 women of the Exodus story, not at all. The universalism of the Exodus story, like Judaism itself, lies in its unique blend of particularism and universalism, not simply in later appropriations of it. I had originally planned to talk about denominational and cause Haggadot, but there's simply too much material to cover to do justice to both topics and not overwhelm listeners. Instead, I'm going to talk only about English language cause Haggadot. Since Passover is the Jewish festival of freedom, the Haggadah is the natural vehicle for the Jewish advocacy of social justice causes. The talk is divided into four parts. We will look at a range of social justice topics and then Jewish particularist causes. Third, we will take a deeper look at how the Haggadah is a vehicle to explore, reflect on, and advocate for these causes. Finally, while not cause Haggadot, I'll showcase a range of miscellaneous special interest Haggadot because they're a lot of fun. I've included a lot of material. Feel free to enjoy the lecture as a visual tour of cause Haggadot. For those interested in the details, the lecture will be available online. I'm 80 years old and not comfortable fielding questions, but please feel free to contact me at landauer@rogers.com. Michael Lerner, the founder of Tikkun magazine, the prophetic Jewish interfaith and secular voice to heal and transform the world, wrote the following in the Haggadah supplement of the 2016 spring issue. We are the descendants of a people that have told the story of liberation from slavery and placed that at the very center of our religion. We took upon ourselves the task of telling the world's people that nothing is fixed, that the world can be fundamentally transformed, and that together we can build an economic, political, social, and cultural reality based on love and generosity, peace and nonviolence, social and economic justice, and caring for each other in the world. This is our inherited calling as the Jewish people. With this in mind, the Haggadah is the natural vehicle for the Jewish expression of social causes. It's Judaism's major expression of that story, its central midrash, the first-person declaration of the Exodus and the core of the identity right, while difficult to unpack, explores social justice issues. And finally, permission to add to the Haggadah, duly noted, can be found in the Haggadah itself in 2 places. The injunction to see ourselves as coming out of Egypt, Le'rod ha'atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim, and the last line of Avadim Hayinu, we were slaves. K'chol hamarbeh l'saper b'yitziat mitzrayim harei ze mishubach. The more one tells or amplifies the story, the more he's to be praised. This in turn is supported by Tarfon's maxim in Pirkei Avot 2:16. It's not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. Judaism is an ongoing struggle for justice to universalize the ethical imperatives of the Exodus. Paradoxically, while cause Haggadot are a logical development from the traditional Haggadah, they negate its purpose and intent, transforming it from the existential reenactment of the Exodus story, which created the Jewish people, to the expression of Exodus ethics in the service of a wide variety of social and economic causes. Cause Haggadot fall into 2 categories: universal social justice ones and those that deal with specific Jewish issues. The former exists largely in digital form, the latter in print form. Poetry appears in many cause Haggadot. One global diversity Haggadah is just poetry. Jews played a leading role in the civil rights movement, and the civil rights movement has a special place in Jewish cause Haggadot, which begin with Arthur Waskow's Freedom Seder at a Seder in 1969 in the basement of a Black church, a year to the day of the assassination of Martin Luther King. It first appeared in Ramparts, April 1969, and was followed by 2 print editions in 1969 and 70. Looking back at the Seder in 2018, why I wrote the Haggadah and why it's still necessary, Waskow said, I dug out my old Haggadah, the one I had been given when I turned 13, into its archaic English renderings of Exodus and Psalms. I intertwined passages from King and Thoreau, Ginsburg and Gandhi, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising against Nazism, and the Nat Turner Rebellion against slavery, the Christian radical A.J. Musty, calling Moses the organizer of Brickmakers Union Number 1, and a pacifist Russian rabbi named Tamaret, wove them all into a new telling of the tale of freedom. In that telling, the then ongoing, even now unfinished struggle of Black America for freedom was interwoven with the ancient story of the Israelites' struggle to end their slavery under Pharaoh. In the Haggadah, Waskow refers to its Jewish and non-Jewish heroes with such Hebrew descriptors as Shofet, judge, and Sadiq, holy man, and doesn't shy away from advocating violence. The brickmaker's analogy also appears in the 1991 Haggadah of the Arbeiter Ring, the Workman's Circle. Waskow revisited his Freedom Seder several times. These include the Rainbow Seder, the first of 3 Haggadot in his 1984 Shalom Seders, which he calls the 5th incarnation of the Freedom Seder, and again in the digital Haggadah, Freedom Seder for the Earth, facing the pharaohs and plagues of our generation. The Common Road to Freedom of Passover Haggadah 1985 was an attempt to restore the Black-Jewish relationship of the early civil rights movement. My husband, Michael, Zichron Levracha, was involved with the Canadian Blacks and Jews in Dialogues and their Haggadah, From Oppression to Freedom, Our Shared Experience in Vision 2001, based on the American version. In 2015, Ben the Ark produced a 5-page supplement, 50 years ago, How We Talk About Liberation, 50 years after Selma. Among its authors are Dr. Clarence Jones, a speechwriter of King, Alicia Garcia, co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Susanna Heschel, a Jewish studies professor of Dartmouth, the creator of An Orange on the Seder Plate for Gays and Lesbians, and the daughter of Rabbi Abraham Heschel, King's friend, pictured 2 men to his right, who was deliberately cut from the 2014 film on Selma, and Yavila McCoy, a Black Jewish advocate, who notes, "This image reminds me of just how powerful the parents of Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel was in teaching love of God as love of justice." The organization takes its name from King's speech at Selma. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, with a qualifier, Jewish action, indicating that the arc doesn't bend by itself. The first 3 supplements are by JFREJ, Jews for Social and Economic Justice. BLM Haggadah, a collaborative Haggadah with Black Lives Matter, focuses on discriminatory and abusive policing. Seder in the Streets advocates for community-based programs in its stead. Jewish resistance at the Seder table is against Trump's discriminatory policies, and the supplement by the Jewish group to end the new Jim Crow calls for an end to the mass incarceration of Blacks. All are digital. In 1987, Jews Against Apartheid, a student group, held an anti-apartheid Seder outside the South African Embassy in London, calling on Blacks and whites to unite. Their Haggadah, Seder for Freedom in Southern Africa, replaces the Exodus story with a history of apartheid and includes songs in Zulu, Xhosa, Hebrew, and Yiddish. Asian Jews and other distinct ethnic minority within Jewish community have their own experiences. In 2023, the Lunar Collective issued a Haggadah, Dancing in Between, celebrating their joint identity as Asians and Jews, showing Miriam walking between the banks of the parted Red Sea. It also celebrates their differences by countries of origin, relationships to Judaism, and sexual preferences. In addition to civil rights, social justice Haggadot embrace a wide variety of issues. The Human Rights Haggadah explores a wide range of human rights, including poverty and hunger, labor, sexual exploitation and reproductive rights, and war crimes and genocide. It's color-coded to display Jewish sources, international law, and the intersection of the two. AJWS, the American Jewish World Service, supports a wide range of activities around the world to combat poverty and fight for social justice. Its Haggadot, subtitled A Global Justice Haggadah, relate the suffering of the Israelites in Egypt to modern-day plights around the world and deals with some of its interventions. Recustom at Haggadot.com, the largest DIY site, offers a 142-page Haggadah for justice culled from other Haggadot. Chai, the Religious Action Center of the Reform Movement, has issued a number of important supplements. Trua, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights, taking its name from the high holiday clarion call of the shofar or ram's horn, advocates for democracy and human rights in the US, Israel, and Palestine. All three Haggadot in this slide identify modern slavery with various types of forced labor and human trafficking. Truah's second Haggadah focuses on immigrants and people of color as the people most vulnerable to human trafficking. All express the urgency of the moment. Invisible states, what you make of slavery, that is the trick. Can you, unshackle, set someone else free? Truah's second Haggadah states, the challenge is not simply to end horrific abuses and to build a more humane system, but fundamentally to determine the character of the United States. Rabbi Deborah R. Prince wrote a Haggadah for a socially responsible chocolate Seder as a giveaway with her book on the chocolate Seder, which explores the historic relationship between Jews and chocolate, as well as the exploitation of workers in the industry. Other chocolate Haggadot simply offer a sweet Seder for children. JUFJ, Jews United for Justice, is a local organization in the Baltimore, Washington area committed to local issues that holds annual labor and social justice Seders. Its slogan, think Jewishly, act locally. The first image lists past Seders through 2020, while the last image announces their 2025 Seders about immigration rights and transit union workers' rights. A 6-page supplement excerpted from Invisible, pictured earlier, begins with human trafficking, while in every generation we're obliged to see ourselves as coming out of Egypt, deals with sexual assault and violence against women. HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, founded in 1903 to aid East European Jews fleeing the pogroms of the 1880s and 90s, now advocates for refugees in general, including Muslims. Its annual Haggadot linked the historic plight of Jews to modern refugees. Pictured is a 2019 Haggadah, which exists in both print and digital form, and a one-page 2024 supplement sharing the bread of liberation against anti-immigration legislation in Europe and America. Mazon, a Jewish response to hunger, issues annual Haggadot concentrating on different aspects of the problem. In 2025, Barbara Lazaroff hosted her 41st charity Seder for Mazon at Spago's restaurant in LA, jointly owned by her and her ex-husband, Wolfgang Puck. In 2024, Freedom Shul of the Poor, a group of working-class Jews committed to abolishing poverty, issued a Haggadah against poverty. Its blessings are in Spanish as well as Hebrew and English. The digital Earth Justice Seder by Chai, the Religious Action Seder of Reform Judaism, deals with climate change. The Promise of the Land by Rabbi Ellen Burstein, the founder of Shomrei Adamah, Keepers of the Earth, deals with the centrality of the land and the need to preserve it. Pri Cherut, Fruits of Freedom, the Torah Flora Haggadah, as indicated on its cover, offers ancient Seder insights from nature, food, and farming. Its author, John Greenberg, a self-styled ethnobotanist, is also very knowledgeable of Jewish food. COVID appears in 2 supplements of the Bayit in Jewish Boston, as well as in a 2020 parody by Martin Boda. In the 4 Cups of Recovery Haggadah, the author Shais Taub replaces the 4 cups of wine with grape juice and states that in doing so, we are even more cognizant of their power. And the anonymous Haggadah describes itself as a synthesis of the Passover ritual and liturgy with the 12 steps of recovery. In 2012, the 2012 BBYO's one-page supplement uses food on the Seder plate to ask what you've done to stand up against bullying. Roberta Kalachowski wrote 3 vegetarian Haggadot, beginning with Haggadah for the Liberated Lamb, 1985, that finds biblical support for a campaign against animal experiments and factory farming and advocates for vegetarianism. While women's and lesbians Haggadot are particularists devoted to the place of women and lesbians in the traditional Haggadah in the Jewish community, LGBT Haggadot lie at the intersection of general and particularist Haggadot, going beyond carving a place for themselves within the Jewish community to fighting for LGBT causes and other forms of intolerance. The 2024 Min HaMeitzar, From a Narrow Place, written by a lesbian, Gabriel Spitzer, makes the marvelous claim that the Haggadah, with its multiplicity of interpretations, is itself non-binary and hence queer. It's been described as liturgically traditional, visually beautiful, ideologically progressive, and discursively provocative. The 2012 Pride Freedom Seder Haggadah of Shar Ar Zahav, a Reformed synagogue with roots in the gay community, celebrates its 8th Pride Seder, while the 2007 Stonewall Seder by B'nai Jeshurun, a non-affiliated synagogue in New York City, marks the 1969 Stonewall riots. JQ Jewish Queers Haggadah is a 164-page DIY Haggadah on recustom.com. Other cause Haggadot deal with issues specific to the Jewish community or from that vantage point. Jewish Liberation Haggadah was written by Aviva Cantor in 1970 with Yitzhak Epstein and Jerry Kirshen, all members of the Jewish Liberation Project, and published by it. Only its second edition from 1971 seems to be available. The Haggadah is directed to those who are beginning to confront their Jewishness and their relationship to the American Galut, exile, Israel, and revolutionary struggle, as well as those already involved in the new radical Jewish and radical Zionist movement. As she states, this is more a Megillah than a Haggadah, with large sections on exile, liberation, and homeland, Galut, Shechur, Moledet. It offers a radical critique of the mentality and status of Jews living in the diaspora, combining classic theorists like Leon Pinsker and Achad Ha'am, and modern theories of colonization and decolonization by Albert Memmi. Ultimately, Zionism is seen as an act of self-liberation. The Haggadah ends with an essay by Hugo Bergman with the last lines: Judaism is the will towards ethical action. Zionism is the form of Judaism which can save the Jews of this age. Marcia Prager's A Radical Haggadah explores Jewish liberation from the Exodus and the Roman rebellion to the Holocaust and beyond. It mentions Jewish participation in social movements like the 1909 shirtwaist maker strike led by the Yiddish speaker Clara Lemlich, and May 68, where one of its leaders, Daniel Cohn-Bendit, is called a filthy German Jew who has led our youth astray. It ends with a powerful statement of the Maharal on the effects of the Exodus. We were always in the depths of our hearts, completely free men and women. We were slaves on the outside, but free men and women in soul and spirit. The same sentiment was articulated by at least one of the released hostages. The oddly named Fourth World Haggadah by the World Union of Jewish Students asserts that we are awakening and returning to our roots. At the same time, it notes the universal social justice implications of the Exodus. After the Freedom Seder, women's Haggadot are the backbone of Jewish cause Haggadot. Many of the earliest ones are known only through listings in other Haggadot and in secondary sources. The 1971 rice paper Haggadah in Portland, Oregon has been identified as the first women's Haggadah. Waskow, in his introduction to the Shalom Seders, mentions that it exists as a single copy, and that the third Seder in the book, though not a woman's Haggadah, is its lineal descendant. Women's Haggadot in general were a response to the inequalities of women in Jewish law, exclusion from rituals, and inadequate representation in Jewish organizations, and arose as part of the general women's movement in which many of its authors participated. Aviva Cantor wrote a short undated Haggadah, Jewish Women's Haggadah, tucked away in a book called Sister Celebrations, 9 Worship Experiences, published in 1974. It's based on her Jewish Liberation Haggadah from 1970, about which she expresses reservations because of its gendered language and the absence of women. The women's Haggadah she envisions focuses on the oppression of Jews and on Jewish liberation from a Jewish feminist viewpoint, which includes the oppression of women, but whose main focus is on Jewish liberation. In 1975, E.M. Broner, Naomi Nimrod, and Marcia Freedom, a member of the Israeli Knesset or parliament, organized a Seder in Israel. And the next year, Broner and Nimrod began annual Seders with the so-called Seder Sisters, which included second wave feminists like Phyllis Chesler, Letty Cotton Pogrebin, and Gloria Steinem. The Haggadah, written by Broner and Nimrod, appears in the April 1977 issue of Ms. under the title A Women's Passover Haggadah and Other Revisionist Rituals. In an interview in Lilith that year, Broner explains the reasons for writing her Haggadah. But if our religion would like to kick us out of it, I think that we have to carefully elbow our way back in and make a new tradition, rewrite ourselves and correct that tradition. A revised edition by Broner with Nimrod, a slight demotion of the latter, appeared as the Women's Haggadah and the Telling with extensive background information in 1993, and the next year in 1994 under the title The Women's Haggadah. It's the best known Women's Haggadah, often cited as the first, which it isn't, and seems to be the kind of narrow Haggadah Cantor feared. Interestingly, Google Books mentions the 6-page work, The Stolen Legacy, a Women's Haggadah from 1977, which has been identified as stapled pages from Broner's original article. Other well-known Women's Haggadot are the San Diego Women's Haggadah, 1977, and the more recent, the Mayan Haggadah, The Journey Continues. Marcia Falk's magnificent old liturgy, Night of Beginnings, not designated as such, is considered by many to be a women's Haggadah. Lesbian Haggadot were a natural spin-off of women's Haggadot. In 1985, Judith Stein, a historian, wrote A New Haggadah, a Jewish lesbian seder. It combines a commitment to Jewish ritual and culture, a positive reflection of Jewish lesbian culture, and the role of Jewish women in the survival of Jews as a people. It's completely secular. As she states, no blessings, no God, and no miracles. Like an orange on a Seder plate, our Lesbian Haggadah, 1999, reprinted in 2018 by Ruth Simkin, is more available and better known. In 1984, Susanna Heschel came across a lesbian Haggadah from Oberlin, which put bread on the Seder plate in response to a comment by a wife of a rabbi. There's as much room for a lesbian in Judaism as there is for a crust of bread on the Seder plate. The next year, in solidarity with gays and lesbians, she placed an orange on her family's Seder plate to replace bread forbidden on Passover, initiating what has become a common practice. Over time, the story changed that a man said to her that a woman belongs on the bima, the raised platform in synagogues, as an orange on the Seder plate. As she states, a woman's words are attributed to a man, and the affirmation of lesbians and gay men is simply erased. Oddly, Simkin repeats the second version of the story. Women's Haggadot regender the main passages of the traditional Haggadah and restore the role of women in the Exodus story and history. The women of the Exodus are Shifra and Puah, the midwives, Yocheved, the mother of Moses, Miriam, the sister, and Batya, Pharaoh's daughter. Miriam received special attention with new rituals and songs. An orange on the Seder plate dates from 1985, a cup for Miriam in the Midrash of Miriam's well providing water for the Israelites in the desert date from 1989, and a special cup was commissioned in 1992. Debbie Friedman's Miriam's song dates from 1998. Many of the rituals surrounding Miriam came too late to be included in Cantor and Broner, but they appear in later women's Haggadot and were later mainstream in liberal denominational and other cult Haggadot. In 1982, Cantor wrote an egalitarian Haggadah with Moses and Aaron alongside the women of the story, and the inclusion of the five rabbis of Bnei Brak, changed by Broner to women. Yiddish was the language of the East European diaspora, now transplanted to America. Among this group were secular communists, socialists, and activists in the labor movement. Their Haggadot reflect this orientation. There are three antecedents: an earlier 20th century Bund Haggadah with a socialist nusach, Red Haggadot of the 1920s, produced in the Soviet Union to wean Jews from communism, and Passover parodies, a venerable genre which followed Jews to the New World with old and new texts. The parody pictured here, Haggadah Lim Malamdim for Teachers from Odessa, 1882, was even reprinted in New York City in 1890. The Yiddish left is represented by three major groups. The Workmen's Circle and the Labor Zionists go back to the 1920s, and mid-century held gala third seders in the grand ballrooms of New York City's finest hotels. The Sholem Aleichem Club held second seders. The Arbeiter Ring, or Workmen's Circle, was established in New York City in 1900 as a mutual aid society, and in 1916 established afternoon and Sunday schools. Under Bundist influence, it became involved with the labor movement and was rooted in diasporism. Its Haggadah, Anaya Haggadah, a new Haggadah, celebrates the rich legacy of Yiddish folk and labor songs. 10 of its songs can be heard in the Milken Archive. Today, Haggadot from its Boston branch use the gender-neutral Workers' Circle. The second wing is the Farbond, or Labor Zionist Alliance, founded in 1905 as an offshoot of the Social Zionist Party, Poalei Zion, the Workers of Israel. But its American counterparts were originally Yiddish speakers. While the 53 Haggadahs in Yiddish, the 69 has mostly transitioned to Hebrew and English. It includes poetry and prose from leading Israeli writers and kibbutz graphics, a matzav of hope for Soviet Jewry, and typical kibbutz memorial yizkors, including one for victims of the Shoah, the Holocaust, though one of its yizkors is in Yiddish. The New York Times records a 1943 Seder at the Astor and Commodore hotels attended by more than 6,000, and a 73 Seder at the Waldorf Astoria attended by 2,000, marking the 25th anniversary of the State of Israel and the 30th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Sholem Aleichem Club, named after the celebrated Yiddish writer whose New York City funeral was attended by 100,000, was established in 1954 and was the third major producer of Haggadot from the Yiddish-speaking left. Published late in the game, its Haggadah for a secular celebration of Pesach by the Sholem Aleichem Club of Philadelphia is mostly in English. Theodore Bickel, the actor and singer, mentions using it one time. Often ignored are the Zionist, Hebrew, English Haggadot of Zionist youth movements. Shomer Hatzair in America produced Haggadot based on those from Shomer Hatzair's Federation Kibbutz Artzi, the national kibbutz movement. Habonim Haggadot reflect those produced by HaKibbutz HaMiyuchad, the United Kibbutz Movement. The fourth Haggadah from Toronto includes Yiddish as well as Hebrew. The English term diaspora from the Greek means dispersion, but the Hebrew term galut denotes exile, which is a very loaded term. The Bible speaks of entries to and exits from Israel as goings up and goings down, and emigrants from Israel were originally called by the pejorative Yordim. Halach Ma'anya in the traditional Haggadah equates slavery with living outside Israel. Diasporism, living in the diaspora, was an integral part of secular Bundeskultur, as represented by the Arbeiterring, and has become a hotly debated topic in the wake of October 8th. On the slide are two very different views on exile. An American Galut Haggadah, designed by Jerry Kirshen and Aviva Cantor, celebrates the resilience of Jews in the diaspora, stating that the survival there constituted in and of itself a revolt against oppression, suppression, and forced assimilation. At the same time, they express pessimism that every Galut begins with Jewish contributions to society, but ends with assimilation and genocide. A litany of oppressors is followed by the cry, "We will never forget nor forgive," and the US and Britain are singled out for their roles in the Holocaust. The Haggadah ends with a traditional next year in Jerusalem, followed by Hatikva, the Jewish national and Israeli anthem. In the end, Kirshen made Aliyah, moving to Israel in 1971, where he's had an illustrious career as the famed Dry Bones cartoonist under the name Yaakov Kirshen. The Haggadah is very rare. There are only two known copies at Harvard and the NIL. The latter's copy is from Kirshen. An interesting aside, Cantor and Kirshen were unable to settle on a consistent spelling of Haggadah. A Judas Haggadah by the English Judas Collective, a self-described radical Jewish diaspora group published by the leftist Pluto Press in 2019, turns diasporism into a satirical, virulent anti-Zionism with 10 plagues of the occupation of Palestine and a prayer, "Please God, smash the state of Israel." 18 of its pages are available online. The year before, the collective hosted a Seder with Jeremy Corbyn. The Holocaust, known in Hebrew as the Shoah, which culminated in the genocide of 6 million Jews, looms large in many Haggadot. In 2000, Saul Tuster, a Brandeis law professor, published and translated a mostly Yiddish Haggadah under the name The Survivors Haggadah. It was a US Army reprint of a 1946 Haggadah written by Whitey Shenson, a survivor of the Kovno Ghetto, with woodblock blocks by the Hungarian artist Miklos Adler, signed Ben Binyamin. It was introduced in English by Rabbi Abraham Klausner, the US Army chaplain at Dachau, later a prominent Reform rabbi in America, and used in a Seder of survivors and soldiers at the Deutsches Theater restaurant. It's a kibbutz-style Haggadah and includes devastating attacks on God, Jews for staying in the diaspora, and Zionist organizations for vying for influence among the survivors. It was obviously met with extreme opposition because it was later reissued in an expurgated edition, and Shainson and Clouser seem to have taken an oath of silence. Shainson died in obscurity in Montreal, and Klausner only mentioned the Haggadah in his memoirs after its existence was exposed. Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi includes it in his large and excellent Haggadah in History, but found nothing untoward because he used the sanitized version. On April 20th, 1970, the Sunday before Passover, 15 members of the Jewish Defense League chained themselves to the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C., and held a Seder with Meir Kahana's Liberation Seder, inspired by Waskows. Mark Podwell, a well-known illustrator, illustrated 2 Haggadot for Soviet Jewry. Let My People Go from 1972 is introduced by Bakel. A second edition, the next year, added a foreword by Abba Eban, known for his eloquent defenses of Israel as UN ambassador. The Haggadah includes a graphic depicting Brezhnev as the Rasha, the wicked son of the 4 sons. The second Freedom Haggadah includes a list of refuseniks in 2 places. Before it went to press, they were freed, and an attached Haggadah insert provides a second list. Podwell also illustrated the Exodus Haggadah from Tyranny to Freedom, 1990, a fundraiser for the United Jewish Appeal, as well as Elie Wiesel's A Passover Haggadah 1993, and the CCAR's Family Haggadah Sharing the Journey in 2012. Both early Reform and the Workmen's Circle were ideologically opposed to Zionism. Sympathy for the Palestinian cause appears in the Seder of the Children of Abraham, in Waskow's Shalom Seders, and in Lesbian Cause Haggadot. Radical Jewish organizations, many of which were overtly or covertly anti-Israel, also produced Haggadot sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. In 2017, CISO, Save Israel, Stop the Occupation, issued the Jubilee Haggadah. It uses the biblical Jubilee year in which slaves were freed and land returned to its original owners to call for an end to 50 years of the occupation. J Street's 15 Steps to Freedom asks what it means in 2020 to be pro-Israel, pro-peace, and anti-occupation. JVP's 2011 Haggadah, one of several it produced before and after October 7th, is overtly anti-Zionist, with the 10 plagues of the Israeli occupation, a Nakba Dayenu, and its third cup of wine is a l'chaim to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. The Hamas massacre of more than 1,200 Israelis in the leftist border kibbutzim and at the Nova Music Festival, and the taking of hostages on October 7, 2023, was the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and even before Israel's invasion of Gaza unleashed near global anti-Semitism. Kevin Chen, a Korean pianist, will long be remembered for opening his October concert at Carnegie Hall with Hatikva, which the Jewish members of the audience sang. A JTA Jewish Telegraphic Agency article on April 21st, 2024, 12 Passover Haggadah supplements to print if you want to discuss October 7th at your Seder, provides an excellent survey of the material. It includes a wide range of creators and perspectives, sometimes within the same Haggadah. Almost all express at least some degree of sympathy for the Gazans. The first pictured is a supplement from the Pluralistic Education Center, the Hartman Institute, based on the 2024 revised edition of Haggadah Yisraeli, Israeli Haggadah, by Tzion and Tzion. It includes passages from Haggadot of Kibbutzim devastated on October 7th, the December 2023 UN speech of Rachel Goldberg, the mother of American Israeli Hirsch Goldberg Poland, maimed and taken captive at the music festival and killed in August 2024 at the age of 23. Avraham Shlonsky's Neder, the vow never to forget the Holocaust, as well as the fake Pour Out Your Love, an antidote to the traditional Haggadah invocation to God to pour out his wrath, and an essay on hope by the acclaimed writer David Grossman, who lost a son in the 2006 Lebanon War. The Hostage and Missing Families Forum supplement for the release of the hostages takes its name from Micah 6:4. and sees its legitimation in the mitzvah or commandment of Pidyon Hashibuyim, freeing captives. The Zuckerman Kolb Haggadah, dedicated to the memory of two victims and to the safe return of Hirsch, Poland, Goldberg, and others, is based on kibbutz and Jewish brigade passages and graphics. A supplement to the 2020 Kveler Haggadah includes new rituals, empty chairs, extra maror, and extra plates. At the far end of the spectrum are two Haggadot. This broken matzah by the Bayit's Liturgical Arts Working Group is an equal opportunity Haggadah, balancing and equating Israel and Gaza. While Hashata Hacha this year from the traditional Haggadah's Halach Ma'anya, which calls itself a justice-oriented Haggadah, is openly anti-Israel. Among other Haggadot of note, not mentioned in the article, are another anti-Israel Haggadah by JVP, Exodus from Zionism, a pro-Israeli one, the Chinitz Zionist Haggadah, How to Teach the Love of Israel at Your Seder, and a Haggadah from Kibbutz Be'eri, one of the hardest hit kibbutzim. Be'eri showed its resilience by producing not only a Haggadah, but a Shavuot cookbook. I got the Hebrew edition of the Hostage Forum and the Be'eri books from a good friend, Nati Wise. Cause Haggadot associate the various elements of the traditional Haggadah with their own causes. Two of the most interesting changes involve additions to the Seder plate, which contain the foods eaten during the ritual meal, and social justice plagues alongside or instead of the 10 plagues God sent against the Egyptians, which finally motivated Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Additions to the Seder plate include an orange for the LGBT community, an olive for Palestinians, a lock and key for mass incarceration, collars for racial justice, coffee beans for forced labor and human trafficking, kimchi for Asian Jews. Vegetarian Haggadot replaced the traditional shank bone with olives, grapes, and grains of unfermented barley. In addition, both the simanim, the ritual steps, and individual passages are repurposed. To give a few examples, Kadesh, sanctification, the first step, making Kiddush, is used by one Haggadah to assert that the work of building a movement to end poverty is sacred work. The fourth step, Yachatz, the breaking of the middle matzah, which allows the same piece of matzah to symbolize both the Egyptian and final redemptions, becomes a metaphor for brokenness. The BLM Haggadah features the brokenness of the judicial system, where court-appointed lawyers provide grossly inadequate legal assistance, citing the harrowing execution of a poor and mentally disabled Black man in Alabama in 2009. Karpas, eating of green vegetables, and the two hand washings, Rachatz and Rakza, steps 3, 2, and 6, and the 4 cups, which easily lend themselves to environmental issues, are applied to other causes as well. Candlelighting, which ushers in all Jewish holidays, is used by a queer Haggadah to remember not just Shabbat candles, but Yortzeit or memorial candles, candles at AIDS vigils, and candles at Take Back the Night marches. Jewish Boston offers more than a dozen alt 4 questions to be used at Seders. The 4 sons, the 4 cups, and Dayenu, it should suffice us, also undergo makeovers. The Asian Haggadah identifies the children as Asian Jewish adoptee, mixed race or interfaith Asian Jew, the patrilineal Asian Jew, and the Asian Jew by choice. Another Haggadah identifies the first 3 as a Zionist, a Palestinian solidarity activist, and a peacenik. In the traditional Haggadah, the 4 cups are associated with 4 mitzvot that are also simanim, and with 4 verbs representing stages of liberation from Exodus 6, 6-7. Women's Haggadot associate them with women of the Exodus, the matriarchs, or significant women throughout Jewish history. Cantor celebrates women of the Exodus story, women ghetto fighters, women pioneers in Israel, and women struggling today to define their Jewishness. Dayenu, it would suffice us, the 15-step song of gratitude for the events of the Exodus, each of which is sufficient to merit our thanks, appears in the positive Dayenu, and in the negatives Lo Dayenu, not Dayenu, detailing sufficient or insufficient actions on behalf of a cause. Boscow's Freedom Seder has a Dayenu opposite, that includes genocide, disarmament, the poisoning of the planet, starvation, and police brutality. The three Tanaitic midrashim amplifying the number of plagues of the Red Sea to show the greatness of the miracle become the multiple atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th. A number of titles take their name from parts of the Seder, Bible references, or other well-known references. More than one supplement calls itself in every generation to see ourselves coming out of Egypt, the passage of the traditional Haggadah that defines the purpose of the Seder. In LGBT, Haggadah takes the name Manishtana, what's different, the first line of the four questions. Mixed multitudes, pictured here, takes its name from the Erev Rav, mixed multitudes in Exodus 12:38, the diverse group that accompanied the Israelites in the Exodus, and deals with diversity within and without the Jewish community and discrimination. Until We Are All Free takes its name from an 1883 quote by Emma Lazarus, the author of the New Colossus on the Statue of Liberty. Until we are all free, we are none of us free, referring to the oppression of East European Jewry. The phrase has special resonance because it became a mantra of the civil rights movement, which changed the order of the phrases and its substance. This is the end of my discussion on cause Haggadot. But as mentioned earlier, I want to end with a few really great miscellaneous pieces. The last decades have seen a resurgence of parodies playing off literature and film, political figures, COVID, and sports. They range from silliness to tackling real issues. The emoji Haggadah is actually a complete Haggadah. The Gateways Haggadah is a special needs Haggadah with Meyer Johnson picture communication symbols for the blessings. The Passover Haggadah by the Jewish Heritage for the Blind is a Braille Haggadah. JBI, the Jewish Braille Institute, today provides free Haggadot in large print, Braille, and audio formats. Pictured are two jazz Haggadot. Lou Reed and John Zorn played at Lincoln Center in 1998, and in 2024, the City Winery celebrated its 35th Seder with a YouTube video. In 2022, a Lego Haggadah appeared. It's 4x4 plate, perfectly suited for matzah. And best of all is a 60-second Haggadah. Sound.
Thank you so much, Hollis. Chag Sameach to you and to everybody else. This was a very, very rich and interesting. I did not expect you to go that far until today. I thought you were going to then. So thank you so much for bringing this to us.